It sounds like this is a publicly funded project, or
The commissioners are all shaking their head no.
I've seen both. Their website says
Hold on.
publicly funded.
I'll pause your time. Hold on.
Now they're asking staff
To
questions.
clarify, are we putting $1 of public funds towards this?
I'm not aware of anything that's been appropriated for it.
And we have, as a board, not even seen, approved, or heard of any dollars we are putting towards this. This is all privately funded.
Okay, it looked like on their website it had that information, but maybe I read it wrong.
Now Captain Chris Whitman comes up to speak.
A young lady up here said that this was, she had concerns this would take up public tax dollars, and the staff said, no, this was $0. I have it right here on Southland's website. It says, is this publicly funded project? The answer is yes. The project would be publicly funded. However, the construction startup would be funded privately. So this will cost the taxpayers dollars, just like in the case of C-51, which was sold as something that would be privately funded that has now cost the taxpayers over $200 million.
You just listened to a clip of the Palm Beach County Commission hearing on the Southland rock mine on May 22nd, 2025. That clip has gone viral. As of the time we're recording this podcast on June 2nd, 2025, it has been viewed by over 2 million people on our YouTube channel. There have been millions more views on other similar exchanges from that day across our social media platform. That exchange lays out exactly what's happening. An industrial rock mine being forced through loopholes disguised as a public water resource project that Florida's industrial sugarcane industry once paid for with your tax dollars. This isn't just about a mine. It's about power, politics, and control of Florida's water. If you fish, go to the beach, drink water, or pay taxes in Florida, this story affects you. Lobbyists and political operatives tried to sneak this past the public. The public caught on, and now they're pushing back in a big way. I'm Daniel Andrews, co-founder of Captains for Clean Water, joined today by the other co-founder, Captain Chris Whitman, and Noah Miller.
Hey, everybody. Captain Chris Whitman.
My name is Noah Miller. I'm the multimedia producer for Captains for Clean Water, and I'll be producing this podcast. But I feel like to really kick this off, we've been talking about doing a podcast for years, like I think 5+ years of just talking about it, knowing when the right timing is. And, with this whole rock mine situation, we kind of all came together and we decided now is the time. Daniel, why don't you walk us through, why do you think now was the time to launch this?
This is one of the craziest fights that we've ever been in. It's one of the greatest threats that Everglades restoration has ever faced. With this rock mine being built in the historic Everglades right next to the Keystone project and potentially threatening the Keystone project of Everglades restoration, the EAA reservoir. There are a lot of complexities to this fight we're in, and we rely heavily on social media to help raise awareness and to educate people on what's going on. But these complex battles require in-depth looks at all the facts and all the information. And we felt that even though we're all very busy in this organization, everybody's wearing many different hats, now is really the time. This Southland rock mine fight in the Everglades needs to be brought to the public, and we need long-form ability to educate our supporters on what's going on with this.
Yeah, and I mean, since myself, I mentioned I work in the multimedia, facet of the organization. Our biggest struggle in Everglades restoration as a whole is we're expected to tell these stories that are highly complicated, tons of details in a 15-second Instagram clip. And although, it works to get public engagement, we're never able to tell that full story. We have to break it up into pieces, leave some critical things out. And I think especially with this rock mine, considering the insane process, all the chaos that's ensued, we, decided this was a good time to tell that full story in a long-form content. And just like you said, long-form content like this podcast is going to be, the best way to tell the full story and all the details and not leave anything out. But, Chris, why do you think, this threat of the rock mine is one of the biggest battles we've come across?
Well, I think two things. One, the public has been so successful in the past 8 years creating pressure to advance Everglades restoration, that we've seen significant progress. We've got the Keystone project in Everglades restoration, the EAA reservoirs under construction directly adjacent to where this rock mine is being proposed. And one of our main concerns is that what could 30 plus years of blasting and excavating next to an above ground reservoir do to jeopardize the integrity of that reservoir? And without that reservoir, Everglades restoration fails. All those different projects in Everglades restoration have to work in concert with each other. And at the heart of those projects is this EAA reservoir. So the threat there that this rock mine could propose to the most important project within Everglades restoration cannot be denied. The other thing is as far as this platform and this podcast, the public outrage around this rock mine proposal is absolutely massive and
Unprecedented. Never seen anything like it.
And it reminds me back to when Captains for Clean Water was born. The public outrage around how our waters were being managed, the preferential treatment to the sugar industry on water supply over the impacts to the estuaries and the economies that rely on our water. The public, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And this takes us right back to that same scenario of the amount of public engagement and what's happened with that army of stakeholders who are fed up is over the last 8 years, they've become incredibly educated on these issues and they are wanting more in-depth content. And I think this podcast will provide that. Definitely.
Stepping back a little bit, we're talking about this rock mine, but this dates back. This isn't something that's developed in, the past couple months. This has been a few years behind the curtains, backdoor deals, and just stepping back a little bit about it. It's the proposed rock mine will be on the industrial sugarcane's land, and they're using the government contractor Phillips and Jordan that will be actually doing the excavating. So those are kind of the players in this. But like I said, it goes back a little bit further. There was this lawsuit against the Army Corps of Engineers over who gets to use that EA reservoir. Chris, why don't you kind of dive in? Because I think it kind of starts with the reservoir, the EA reservoir lawsuit.
And throughout Everglades restoration, you have had these attempts by the sugar industry to either maintain control or get control of more water and how water is managed in Florida. And this is no different. Just in the past couple of years, we had a lawsuit from the sugar industry, specifically U.S. Sugar and Florida Crystals and the Sugarcane Growers Co-op. Two of those, U.S. Sugar and Florida Crystals are the party that's proposing this rock mine project. That they were suing the Army Corps of Engineers over the operations of that EAA reservoir, a $4 billion taxpayer investment, the heart of Everglades restoration. And what they were suing over was basically saying that they should be entitled to access to that water before it is made available to the Everglades, the entire purpose of Everglades restoration. They lost that lawsuit. They lost it at the district level. They appealed that decision, and they lost it again at the appellate level. And in that lawsuit, there was an amicus brief that was on behalf of the Army Corps. The party to that brief, one of the parties in that brief was South Florida Water Management District, basically going against the sugar industry. And so the irony here that you have Big Sugar, you've got the sugar industry here who fought against this reservoir, now coming to the very entity at the South Florida Water Management District saying, hey, we want to partner with you to provide a beneficial water resource project. Just the logic and common sense there does not add up. There's no way you would spend millions of dollars and years fighting a project to then a couple months later turn right back around and say, hey, we want to provide this project to you.
Yeah, and just a little context there. When Chris says we want to provide this project, Daniel, kind of talk about we've been calling it a rock mine. What are they calling it?
So they're calling it a water resource project, but let's start at July 1, 2024. And I'm trying not to bore people with the policy side of this, but this is crucial to understand. So July 1, 2024, a new law took effect in Florida. This was passed in the 2024 legislative session. What this law did was it paved a pathway for unsolicited proposals to be submitted to state agencies. A private entity could come forward and say, we want to enter into this public-private partnership without the agency asking for it, wanting it. Kind of a strange law. It was not something that was on our radar at that point. 48 hours after that law went into effect, Phillips and Jordan submitted an unsolicited proposal to the South Florida Water Management District for this Southland, as they're calling it, a water resource project. And the proposal was vague. They were not talking about how this is a rock mine that could extract over the course of 35, 45 years, potentially, $1 billion or more of aggregate out of the ground. This proposal was focused around the facade that was put forward that this is a water resource project, and we're trying to sell it that there was some benefit to Floridians as a result of doing this. So Phillips and Jordan, they're a major government contractor. They've received hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars to build Everglades restoration projects. And, they've done some good work on some projects here. But in this specific case, what's happening is they're fronting for the landowners, U.S. Sugar and Florida Crystals. Typically when these permits are applied for, it's the landowner that's applying for the permit. Their name is on the application. But what's happening here is you've got, the one of the largest political contributors in the state of Florida that are often putting tens of millions of dollars in per election cycle, being the industrial sugarcane industry. They don't necessarily have the best reputation with Floridians. They have, in fact, quite the opposite. Floridians for decades have called them big sugar. And what appears to be happening here is you have this government contractor, Phillips and Jordan, that is essentially fronting for the sugar industry, trying to sell this to the public, that there's some type of public benefit to the sugar industry putting this massive rock mine on their land, agricultural land, currently historical Everglades, immediately adjacent to that EAA reservoir.
I think, before we get into how it came across our desk and our involvement with it, I think it's important to understand, the sugar industry, they are all about maximum profits, and they grow sugarcane. So maximum yields each year. I mean, if you go drive in the EAA, it is sugarcane as far as you can see. So I think, we've gotten some comments on our social. Why, high level, why would they take farmland that I just described? They're so precious over, some of the best farmland in the country. Why would they take that out of production? Like, why is sugar wanting a rock mine?
Yeah, well, you have a scenario in the EAA, the Everglades Agricultural Area, which, for those of you that aren't aware of it, is directly south of Lake Okeechobee, and it's the main flowway that connects
Used to be the Everglades.
Lake Okeechobee through all the way down through what is today Everglades National Park. It's the most critical area for restoration projects in the whole entire system. And after decades of farming in this area, you've had soil subsidence where it's oxidized, dried out, and they've lost the soil to the point now that in that southern part of the system near where this project is proposed, they've lost about 8 feet of soil. And they're now reaching caprock to where it's no longer really productive. And they're looking at what is the next commodity they can extract from that property. Here, in this case, they're looking at it being limestone and sand. But even longer down the road from that, it's really goes back to that effort to control water and to get access to more water and control of more water. And so by digging a 8,600 acre mine, you get to extract $800+ million worth of aggregate out of it, and then you're left with a hole in the ground that is full of water, and the question then becomes, who does that water belong to? And so I think it's a multi-level play of shifting from the commodity being sugar to being aggregate and then to ultimately being water.
Gotcha.
And as you heard in that Palm Beach County commission meeting dialogue,
The clip at the very beginning.
They're seeking public taxpayer dollars to pay for this project. This is an industry that is subsidized, propped up by taxpayers on many different levels. The state of Florida, taxpayers in Florida are heavily contributing to their irrigation supply, how the water is moved around the EAA. You have their actual product. I mean, you have 95% plus of the EAA that is in sugarcane production on average. And the federal price supports on refined sugar, it's a very strong example of crony capitalism where you have these price floors and loans where they can essentially forfeit their crop to the federal government and get cash payout, then go sell it for a higher price and then pay back, at no interest those loans. So their runoff is subsidized by state-funded stormwater treatment areas in the EA, filter marshes that the taxpayers are carrying the vast majority of the burden on. So, they're heavily subsidized in several different ways, and they're also asking the taxpayers to pay for their rock mine, which we don't want.
What's crazy to me is, refined sugar is so heavily subsidized, like you just mentioned. Do all other farmers that are growing actual food, do they get the same luxuries? Is that something you know?
Sugar's been one of the most heavily subsidized crops, and this goes back to the 1930s. Even before that, there were subsidies on refined sugar, but it's just one of those things that once you are the status quo, once this program makes it into the giant federal bureaucracy that gets into ag subsidies, it's hard to get rid of that, even though we know sugar is horrendous for us. There's zero need to have it in your diet whatsoever. It's a poison. It's addictive. It has no place in our diet. Unfortunately, it's in almost everything you eat. It's in heavily spread across anything that's in a package. There's a real strong chance that it's going to be high in sugar. But if you look at all the downstream implications of that, how much we're spending on healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, that's being exacerbated by the massive amount of added sugars that are in our diet, really makes you look at this and just think, why are we subsidizing sugar?
Yeah, I mean, they've just injected themselves in politics like I've never seen before.
And I think it's, as we're getting into this and people are beginning to understand what's going on, to understand how powerful this industry is, rewinding the clock to the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal. You had a sitting U.S. president who, according to the investigation that went on after that, the Ken Starr report, Monica Lewinsky was in the Oval Office as they're ending their affair. They're having this affair that stretched on for a period of time. Monica and the president goes to Monica and says, we got to end this. And as he's, ending what ends up being one of the most defining parts of his presidency, the phone rings. It's Alfie Van Hool, the chairman and CEO of Florida Crystals, calling to voice his concerns about his vice president, Al Gore, who was in Florida and was asked by reporters that day, would you support a penny a pound tax on sugar grown in Florida to help restore the Everglades? And he said yes. And that caused enough of an issue to where the CEO of this company, chairman and CEO of the company,
Direct line,
able to get the president of the United States of America on the phone in the Oval Office as he's attempting to end an affair with an intern that ends up consuming the airways for weeks and weeks and months after these investigations take place. So if you want to know how much power, how much political clout, they've got two brothers, a Republican and a Democrat, that have figured out how to master the system. They give to the Democrats, they give to the Republicans. They've got lines to the highest political levels.
Yeah, I think that's a good, starting point to pretty much frame what we're up against. We often call it a David and Goliath fight. We're sitting in the room with 4 people total versus the entire sugarcane industry that, you just mentioned have a direct line to the Oval Office. But jumping back specifically to this rock mine situation, at what point, Daniel, did we catch wind of this? Like, how did this all go down from our point of view?
At some point, late July, early August, we caught wind that this had been submitted to the Water Management District. Again, this is a brand new process. We really didn't know anything about these unsolicited proposals. I mean, it seems like kind of a crazy idea. Like, you're just going to let random people come forward and
I don't think anyone knows it unsolicited. Based on what has happened so far, this whole process.
Let's look at the way a normal Everglades restoration project would come to fruition. Is the engineers and designers at South Florida Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers would come up with a project that's identified in the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan that would work to take water from Lake Okeechobee, reconnect the system, clean the water, and send it back to the Everglades where it naturally went. They would design this project, and then they would seek contractors to do the actual construction. Dig this hole this big, this deep.
Yeah. Like the district would do the science, the data, all
the
of
designing, all of that.
in the Army Corps of Engineers.
And the
that.
Army Corps.
Okay.
In the way this works is you have the contractor who in the other roles is simply following the plans and executing, physically running the heavy equipment, is now proposing their own project.
So that sounds backwards.
It's backwards. They've now taken it and saying, hey, we've got this project that we're proposing. And so it's literally an unsolicited project. The normal way is for the Corps or the district to solicit workers or companies to build these projects. In this case, they have not solicited. They have not identified a need or an opportunity and then solicited the contractors to put in bid to do the work. In this case, the contractor and the landowners, U.S. Sugar and Florida Crystals, are soliciting to the agency saying, we've got this idea for this project.
Interesting. And like we mentioned, we know that contractor is Phillips and Jordan, pretty much speaking on behalf of the sugar industry because that's the land in which they would want to do this project, is on Sugar's land. Okay, back to our involvement with it. You started hearing some rumblings. Did you talk to any of the other organizations? Who did you talk to? What was their thoughts on it?
We reached out to the Water Management District early on and had conversations that were encouraging. I mean, I think even the leadership on the staff level at the Water Management District, including the executive director, seemed to be concerned and were almost kind of laughing this off. It didn't seem like something that had any, no common sense or logic would say this is a good idea to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what we were picking up, and that's what we were hearing from other partner organizations. It's like, we don't need a rock mine in the Everglades. There is a tremendous amount of value for that land to be used for true restoration projects. This is not one of those.
Interesting. And, it's just weird to me because when I started at Captain's, the district, we were just crushing projects, massive milestones. It seemed like every week there was a new ribbon cutting. And then this rock mine proposal comes around and like the vibe just overall shifted. There was like a switch that went off and just everything started different. Seemed different, our relationship with them. Why do you think, was there a different outside pressure on the district? Like what do you think that was?
Yeah, I mean, look, all these state agencies, their strings are all pulled from higher political levels, and these, the system of government, there's a lot of opportunity for individuals to look at self-serving ways of operating, and something from the very beginning has just seemed very fishy about this. Very early on, we reached out to the governor's office, expressed our strong opposition to this project, told them, do not advance this. This is not restoration. This is a bad idea. This is all time frame. I think everybody who lives in Florida probably remembers, August, September of 2024, there was a huge controversy over the state parks in Florida. There was a proposal put forward to build golf courses, pickleball courts, tennis courts, all kinds of just crazy hotels, resorts in the middle of our state parks. So this rock mine proposal surfaces right around the same time all that was happening. And our message was, look, that was a bad idea. This is a bad idea. Don't advance it. And we thought common sense would prevail there, but ultimately decided, hey, look, we need to bring this issue to the public. Something smelled fishy about it. Something just didn't feel right from the very beginning. So we posted about it on social media, put kind of a stake in the ground that we didn't like this project. Something seemed off with it. Just the whole timing of, you have a brand new process. 48 hours later, they're shoving, one of the greatest potential threats to Everglades restoration in history into this, brand new process.
It's like the first thing that came through this new process, basically.
The very first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you looked back at some of our earlier social content around that, it was really just those questions. It was like something does not feel right. And one of the things that we've always been good at Captains for Clean Water is trusting our instinct and trusting our gut. And this was one of those times where red flags were going off, and those initial, we see it as our responsibility to bring these types of issues to the public, to provide full transparency. That's one of the things that is lacked in government is that transparency and that due process. So that's what we try to provide with Captains, and that's where we started messaging was like, we don't know the exact details here, but something doesn't seem right, and we're going to keep looking into it.
Yeah, so like we mentioned, we posted on social media, and they quickly withdrew their application in this process, which was also a little fishy. Like, why would they do that? And then in order for this project to move forward, they needed this project identification letter. That was kind of the linchpin of this rock mine proposal moving forward, and it had to be this project identification letter signed by the executive director of the South Florida Water Management District. And this letter comes up multiple times in steps that we will get to. But Daniel, why don't you kind of let's talk about this letter, what it is, and just kind of all the drama behind it.
Yeah, this letter is really the linchpin of this whole project. It was what was absolutely needed. And the interesting thing about this is the applicant, Phillips and Jordan, initially was asking the Water Management District to send this letter in April of 2024. So before that law was even in place.
Oh, so they were already making some moves.
That's, I think, why we were questioning this so much right from the very beginning. You have this proposal 2 days later. They're trying to shove this project through it, but the real work on this began before this process even existed in state statute. So Palm Beach County could not amend their comp plan to allow. There's been a multi-decade history of attempts to rock mine in the Everglades. Some of them have gone all the way to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta. But they've been shot down. Permits have been issued. They've been revoked to mine in the Everglades for a variety of concerns from impacts to drinking water, impacts on Everglades restoration. These mines weren't even close to the EAA reservoir. They weren't even close to any restoration project, and there were still significant concerns about what impact this mining could have. So they're following this loophole in the Palm Beach County comp plan to allow for rock mining under the guise of a water resource project, and that's what this is all about. It's a loophole in Palm Beach County's comp plan that after decades of attempting to mine in the Everglades, they figured out by having the Water Management District called a water resource project, by having this new loophole in state law that allows these unsolicited proposals, it created like this perfect alignment of all these loopholes to where they could, if as long as the public was not paying attention, ram this thing through the process with very few. There's literally was 2 public hearings on this. That's all it had to go through. But they saw this opportunity where the stars of bureaucracy loopholes aligned to be able to shove this thing through quickly. This letter, as you mentioned, Noah, the proposal was withdrawn after we raised attention to it. They resubmitted it on Christmas Eve, and unfortunately, on New Year's Eve, Director Bartlett of the Water Management District sent them that letter of project
He
identification.
sent Palm Beach County.
Sent
the
it to
letter?
Palm Beach County.
Okay, and that was moving along the steps. But there's even crazier information about this letter. Chris, do you want to kind of describe what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and so the applicant couldn't get Palm Beach County to move forward with amending their comp plan to allow this rock mine without the Water Management District providing that letter that says we've identified this as a water resource project. Where it gets really interesting is not only did they send that letter, but it was uncovered by an investigative journalist, Jason Garcia, how that process, the original drafts of that letter were not even written by the executive director at the Water Management District. They were actually written by a lobbyist for U.S. Sugar.
But the interesting thing about that is they were sent by Phillips and Jordan. They went into the metadata on those files and saw a lobbyist for U.S. Sugar was, he had written or edited this, at some point. So, again, it's the sugar industry works through proxies. They do not have a good reputation in Florida, just as far as, public opinion goes. So they, this appears that they were doing everything they could to keep their fingerprints off of it. Certainly, I don't think they were expecting the public to figure out that, I'll read the specific text from the letter that Director Bartlett said. The district believes that at this time on the identified site connected to a district canal with the right configuration, this project will likely provide viable alternative technologies for both water management and water treatment for ecosystem restoration complementary to the EAA reservoir complex and surrounding infrastructure. Now, as we'll get into a little bit later, that was posted all over at the Palm Beach County Commission. That was kind of the crux of this whole decision that we'll get into on ultimately where they approved the permit for Palm Beach County to excavate in the Everglades.
It's just crazy to me. We talked about how important this letter was in order for the project to move forward so they could start digging this mine in the ground. They needed this letter, and they needed it from a legit agency of the South Florida Water Management District, from the executive director of that agency. And the letter, the initial draft, wasn't even written by him. It was written by a lobbyist for Sugar. And Sugar is lobbying on behalf of this project too. So they just made the letter for their own project.
And this is just one of the many examples of corporate influence into the public process, or in this case, the lack of public process. If you look at Everglades restoration projects, they go through years of communications and studies and opportunities for the public to weigh in, for scientists to weigh in, to evaluate, before any agency would say, hey, we're putting this into motion. And so this is really just an example of that, of political powers using their political leverage to bend the system to their will.
Yeah.
At the expense of the public.
At the expense of the public.
Yep. I think we can, what we need to go into is kind of the science behind this. The what is the actual risk of putting this rock mine, we mentioned it's going to be pretty close to the EA reservoir. Let's kind of dive into that. Daniel, why don't you kick us off on just what is the risk of a project like this?
There are many concerns with this. You have, such, and I also, just transitioning off what we were talking about with this letter has been so alarming. I mean, we've only been, Captains for Clean Water has only existed for 9 years as an organization, but we work with dozens of different Everglades restoration organizations. Some of them have been, 30, 40 years involved with this history. And there is just this tremendous amount of shock, frustration, anger, surprise, confusion on this whole process. That's really important to understand. And our partnerships with some of those science-based organizations like the Everglades Foundation that have sent letters expressing strong opposition, many letters on this mine that really articulate some of those things. We can walk through some of them now, but first and foremost, this project is, there's 1,000 foot buffer zone between the EAA reservoir, which again is an above ground. They scrape down to the cap rock, and they're stacking water 24 feet high above the ground, immediately adjacent to a rock mine, which is a pit in the ground that they're blasting with dynamite for 35, 45 years and dredging these, massive, dredges through to excavate all that to sell for profit. That's the big concern here. You've got, as part of Everglades Restoration, which was a bipartisan plan passed in the year 2000 to advance Everglades Restoration, 3 main critical reservoirs. And Captains for Clean Water was founded to advance this. I mean, when we founded Captains, we were 16 years into a 30-year plan to fix this, and 0 of the 68 projects have been completed, largely because the sugar industry's influence on this had allowed these to just kind of be put on the back burner. But of these 3 reservoirs that are the heart of restoration, you have one on the west coast, C43, one on the east coast called C44, and then this is the big one, the cornerstone, is the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, or EAA Reservoir, and that's the one south of the lake. Only one of these 3 reservoirs is completed right now today, the C44, and as soon as they filled it up with water, it started leaking. There was water seeping out the barrier, and this is, concrete fortified, heavily engineered, but, it's just like anything else, engineering does not guarantee flawless execution and operation, and that's what happened. It started filling up with water, and then it started seeping out the bottom. Look, our geology is incredibly fragile in Florida. I mean, Chris, tell us about the limestone and just the concerns here with.
Yeah, I mean, most of our substrate here in South Florida is a mixture of sand, shell, or limestone. Limestone itself is very porous, brittle, and so if you look at just what the impacts of blasting, they bore holes down in through the limestone, a series of holes, almost like a checkerboard, and then they fill that with explosive, and they detonate that, and that fragments all that rock, and then they come in and excavate it out. What those shock waves would do through the rest of the substrate and surrounding areas, I mean, we've been out there for some of the blasts doing these Everglades restoration projects, and you can feel it from miles away.
Yep.
And so
The ground was literally rumbling.
yeah, it rumbles. It's like thunder. You can feel it in your chest. So the thing here is when you're building these Everglades restoration projects, you're building them where there is no other project to harm. You're kind of doing it in a sequence that you're doing those excavating and those blasts, and it's nothing but raw land. And not only, even with all the design that goes into like that C44 reservoir that ended up leaking, and they're figuring out how to fix it, those reservoirs, this EAA reservoir, was not designed to anticipate 40 years of blasting next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's so many questions, not just with the geology of Florida and limestone and what could that do, but did the design and engineering of the EAA reservoir take into account 40 years of blasting 1,000 feet away?
Yeah.
And the
Probably
fact
not.
is it did not, because this project did not exist. This project is not part of the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. It's not one of those 68 projects that
Yeah.
Daniel spoke of.
And I think it's important for the public to know this. The EAA reservoir, we've mentioned, it's the cornerstone of Everglades restoration. first of all, it is a taxpayer-funded project.
$4 billion.
$4 billion of taxpayer funds, and it is one of the major solutions in solving the problem of which we were founded, was eliminating these toxic discharges that destroy not only our estuaries but the local economies for years on end. You know, there's an economic study that's out right now, and it highlights the billions of dollars that is lost from these toxic discharge events. This EA reservoir, it solves that, and the proposal is to put a giant rock mine in blast for 40 years right next to it that can risk all of the progress that's been made on this EA reservoir. So that's kind of what is at stake here.
Yeah,
And
and
the other-
these algae blooms, I mean, you can literally see them from outer space. I mean, you have 700 square miles of toxic cyanobacteria, blue-green algae on Lake Okeechobee, many summers. You've got insane red tide blooms on the Gulf Coast of Florida that are, science has proven, are exacerbated by these Lake Okeechobee discharges, where you see literally hundreds and thousands of tons of dead marine wildlife, dolphins, manatees, sea turtles, tarpon, snook, redfish, all the way to whale sharks washing up on the beach. This is, and something that you know, we've done economic research on. Tens of billions of dollars of economic harm can be done by one of these discharge events to the coastal communities. I mean, the economic side of this issue is incredibly convincing. But going back to the science on this, I mean, you it's the threat to the reservoir, but also critical wetlands. I mean, Chris and myself have duck hunted on the stormwater treatment areas many times. A lot of Floridians have. You know, they're fed by water, and they can clean the water. But when you're, you know, excavating these rock mines, if you go on Google Earth and just look at these rock mines, I mean, the color of the water in them is like turquoise, silty. It looks unearthly when you're looking at it on satellite. And you know, some of the science-based organizations like Everglades Foundation have pointed out, you know, could release phosphorus, sulfates, chloride, radium, and potentially other substances that stand to threaten these ecologically sensitive but environmentally and economically critical filter marshes that are really the greatest bottleneck in Everglades restoration. Sending water south right now is having that ability to clean Lake Okeechobee's polluted water and get it into the Everglades. And keep in mind that lawsuit that Chris was talking about earlier, the use of that wetland, the use of the wetland component of that EAA reservoir was a key part of the lawsuit, in the sugar industry claiming that was taking away from their water supply, hydrating the wetlands that are critical to Everglades restoration and cleaning water to send south.
And did we already touch on, you know, we do always say that storage is great. We need more storage. We need to take water out of Lake Okeechobee so that we don't get these discharges. And that's what the applicant and sugar is kind of using to their advantage, because they're using our talking points and saying, oh, like, we're doing this because we need more storage. But Chris, kind of talk about it's not just storage.
Yeah, the major kind of limiting factor in the ability to send clean water south to the Everglades is the ability to clean that water. It's filter marshes. These are man-made engineered wetlands. They're basically impoundments that are shallow that you put aquatic plants in. Those plants take up the nitrogen and the phosphorus out of that water and then give you clean water out the back end of that to send through to the Everglades. And that's the limiting factor. We need, with more storage without cleaning capacity, doesn't benefit us. You cannot send polluted water
It's illegal.
into the Everglades. So the current engineered wetlands, STAs, they're called, stormwater treatment areas, are at capacity, dealing primarily with the industrial sugar industry's polluted runoff from their fields. And so these wetlands, like the EAA reservoir wetland, are intended to treat Lake Okeechobee water and clean Lake Okeechobee water. If this proposal was for 8,600 acres of engineered wetland, we'd be championing it.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a hole in the ground. And with no stated cleaning capacity, no filter marsh, no, just saying it's water supply, that the water supply, without the ability to clean it, it does the Everglades no good. And it's important to understand that EAA reservoir, the reason it's beneficial is because it provides storage and cleaning capacity. And yes, it does have a benefit to reducing the discharges to the east and west coast, but its main purpose is also to provide clean water back to the Everglades.
Yeah.
A national park, a World Heritage Site, one of the most iconic fisheries on the planet that is dying because of lack of fresh water. Look, man 100 years ago went in and drained the Everglades because they thought it was a good idea. Now we have the largest ecosystem restoration project in the history of the country being undertaken to fix those mistakes. And, you know, it would be asinine not to learn from history.
Yeah. We're in a scenario right
do
now.
not let history repeat itself when you see. And so we're investing billions of dollars and decades of work to fix what we screwed up in draining the Everglades nearly a century ago. To make a similar mistake like this by approving a rock mine in the Everglades that could jeopardize the integrity of that reservoir and Everglades restoration, it could jeopardize the quality of the water, releasing those things into the water. And in Florida, anybody that's in Florida, you don't have to dig very far before you hit water.
Mm-hmm.
What are the question is, you know, what are the consequences if you screw that up? And the consequences could be irreversible.
And what also just the precedent that it sets. You know, this is opening the door now. If this goes all the way through and this doesn't stop, what's going to stop another company to come in and be like, you allowed them to put a mine in? You know, our farmland's subsiding too. We don't have any use of this. We're going to put a rock mine in too. And then suddenly the entire center of the state south of Lake Okeechobee is just covered in rock mines.
Well, and that or the cost that it would that you would open up for litigation from those landowners to the state. And guess who bears the state or the burden of the financial burden of those litigation is taxpayers. So if all of a sudden the state is opened up to massive litigation by other landowners saying you provided this to these, or it could even be the same landowners. You gave us permission here. You have to give us permission. This, one way or another, could open the door to either be a death threat for the Everglades or tie up billions of dollars in taxpayer money, either to fund these projects or to go into litigation, against them. You are opening Pandora's box.
Yeah. I mean, you hear it out loud. You would think, yeah, why would they approve a rock mine? And it's like, you would think for a project like this, and especially because they're the sugar industry in Phillips and Jordan is framing it, oh, this is a water resource project. This is for Everglades restoration. So what we do know is there's 57 organizations in the Everglades Coalition. Did the applicant ever reach out to any of them? You would think the people that work in Everglades restoration every single day, if the applicant says that they're doing this for us, for Everglades restoration, you would think he would reach out to all of these groups and be like, are we doing this right? You know, the scientists in all these organizations, did they reach out to anybody?
We've got something here to show you in a little bit. I want to close up on this point here, though, because we've got they're not just approving a rock mine. They are fast-tracking the rock mine with zero transparency. And that's really the key here. This is happening way outside the public process. And that is, that's the big issue here. The fact that this is happening, with the transparency of a concrete wall, that's what's most concerning. I mean, if you have a friend who's getting ready to make a major life decision and they're like hemming and hawing, what recommendation do you give them? Sleep on it. Mm-hmm. Think about it. They are forcing this through at warp speed through the public process. Yeah. And that's the big issue with this. Before we get into, we've got some clips from Palm Beach County from the commission meeting. I want to talk a little bit about the process. So there was this after, this is all backroom agency to municipality communication at this point. There is a zoning commission meeting with the Palm Beach County Zoning Commission. There is with a vote. There's a vote at the Palm Beach County Board of County Commission meeting, May 22nd. 2 public hearings of the Water Management District, and that's it with this. So let's talk about that zoning commission meeting. Chris, Noah, y'all were both there for that one. This was April 3rd, 2025. I think the theme of the day was confusion. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that meeting, it's like every step that we've seen this go through, the more we've dug into it, the less clear things have become. And that meeting was a great example of, you've got this committee that in essence hears the proposal, has staff look into it, make sure, hey, are the proper steps that are in place to ensure that things happen in the best interest of the public, have they been completed? Is this going to a point where this is a benefit to the public? And at that meeting, the amount of confusion between the understanding of what the project even was to where it was in the process, or whose responsibility it was in what part of the process, there was so much confusion between the committee members, and those committee members vote, and then they advise the county commission for their vote, which would happen, after that. So the amount of confusion that was taking place between those board members there and the staff and the applicant and the applicant's representatives or consultants, it was so clear that it was like, if you were in that room, there's so much confusion here and such a lack of understanding of what the project even is that they're approving and where it's at in the process, that you would have thought that there's no way you would even hold a vote on this.
Yeah, why vote if you don't know all the information?
Yeah, it was just so clear. And so that was, I think, the main thing that that we took away from it, and that the public took away from that as well, is it was uproar, it was disbelief from the public that I can't believe they even bothered to vote on this, because it was so clear they had no clear understanding of what this project was or where it was in the process.
Yeah, and I was there as well, filming it all, and the same thing. Not only confusion, but almost chaos. You have this zoning board committee who's making the first very important decision of whether this rock mine keeps on moving through the process, and they're asking questions, and they literally have said, I don't remember exactly what they said, but it sounded like it was the first time even seeing these details. They were so confused on what they were even voting on. And a lot of them, although they didn't know all the details, they didn't really know what they were voting, they still voted yes.
Well, some of them did. And there was some on that committee that were asking for clarity from the staff that had looked into this. They were saying, is this a water resource project? Is it a rock mine? What are we approving if we approve this? And staff, they got 2 different answers from staff. One was like, yeah, it's a water. And then one of the staff, it is a permit to excavate. It is a mine. It is mining. And then one of the other committee members said, no, this is a rock mine. There was this total just confusion between the different members there. And even one of them, after that exchange, who voted no, since then has been removed from his position on that committee. If that doesn't show the tentacles and influence that the sugar industry has, we talked about all the way up to at the level of the president.
Yeah,
but even
and he was
even
easily
down to,
asking the most questions. Obviously, we have no way of saying for sure he was removed for his no vote, but it was like 2 days, 3 days later, suddenly was removed.
Yep.
And he was definitely the most vocal on that issue. But I think the overall takeaway from that Palm Beach County is, despite the crazy lack of information that was given to the zoning board committee, they still voted yes. And that kind of goes to show what Chris just mentioned, that the sugar industry is extremely powerful. And that's another thing, they said their disclosures all at the beginning of that meeting. Every single one of them talked to sugar before the meeting.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Palm Beach County has a very strong history of rolling over for special interests. In the early 2000s, there was a huge scandal that took place over in Palm Beach County. Commissioners were indicted for corruption charges, public corruption charges. The local papers had renamed Palm Beach County the Corruption County. People went to jail over this. It's unfortunately, that kind of stuff happens at these local municipalities far too often. But I mean, you have one of the sugar companies, Florida Crystals, headquartered right there in Palm Beach. They, from their involvement and cash that they're funneling into local chambers of commerce, business groups, charitable giving, they have a very strong foothold in Palm Beach County. So it's that was on full display both at the zoning hearing as well as the big one, which was May 22nd. You want to jump into that?
Just for the listeners, real quick, we're kind of explaining the process here. It went to we just described the Palm Beach Zoning Committee,
which is kind of like the committee before it makes it to the full board of county
exactly. And then the very next step is the full Palm Beach County Commission vote. And yeah, Chris, why don't you dive in? That was the next step here.
Yeah, so that meeting took place on May 22nd, and it was one of the only few opportunities where the public could voice their concerns over this, and a tremendous amount of the public showed up to voice their opposition to this project. They were there hours early, dozens and dozens of people, and to come in and the way that the protocol is for that is that if you're there as a member of the public in public comment, you get 3 minutes to speak on the issue. If you're representing an organization, you can be afforded 5 minutes or more if you're an expert. And so immediately when that meeting got going, you could see body language from those commissioners. One, they were very uncomfortable or annoyed or agitated by the presence of our cameras and the amount of media that was in the room, as well as just the amount of people. There was comments made that we've received, thousands of emails, 7,000 emails about this issue. And then under our breath, we're not going to read all of those. And then it was told, there's so many people here. We're in interest for us to basically get on with their day. They're going to cut your public comment time down to 2 minutes.
Yeah, which people, they didn't go to work that day. These are people that have 9-to-5 jobs.
Yeah, there was multiple fishing guides there that, gave up a $1,000 charter to drive to there to speak for 3 minutes. And they were, even just like the attitude and body language, it was that was the big thing. It was like, we are being inconvenienced by you. It was like these board members and their process was being inconvenienced by the public.
Yep.
Yeah, that's like if you were to describe the zoning committee as confusion, like that was kind of the theme of that day was confusion. It went to arrogance at the county commission. And that is, it was on full display. I mean, we've got some clips to share with you here. But at that point, like Chris said, I mean, we had people that drove 3-4 hours plus to be there to speak and to get there and be told, oh, sorry, you only have 2 minutes because there's too many people here. And making jokes at I think one of the commissioners had 7,000 emails, as they're kind of, snarking and rolling their eyes as they're reading that.
They even stated like, we're not going to read all of those, but it's like, you can email us, you can share, we're not going to bother to hear what you're
not going to read it.
And we weren't there to say, don't do this. We were simply there to say, pump the brakes, let's think this through, delay this vote, let the Water Management District, let the Army Corps of Engineers perform a thorough analysis on this project they haven't even determined. You got the Army Corps of Engineers at the direction of a member of Congress on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee undergoing an evaluation. They haven't even determined their criteria yet. You've got the Water Management District in the very early phases of their analysis, just at that point determining what they were going to use as criteria in the study. That's where they were. None of this had been vetted. And this was the last governing body with public hearing voting on this. Everything else is procedural at that point. This is the last vote on this project.
Real quick, Daniel, I think that's a great point. Is the two entities, the South Florida Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers, have barely scratched the surface on their process to look at this Southland rock mine, yet it was moving forward with approvals. So the science and evaluation hasn't even been done yet of the risks of what this project will even look like, the actual proposal, which to this day, they can still change their proposal.
That's the kicker here, is not only has the analysis of the proposal not been completed, but the actual details of a final proposal have not been submitted. So the applicant can change what they're even proposing.
Yeah, but
they're selling it to the county as this process is already well underway. You're just holding up. You're the next, move on the board. You're the next process. When the reality of it is the project that is being proposed that the Water Management District will analyze has not been submitted in its final form.
Yep.
And this is what pisses people off about it, because you've got, a typical process of significant amount of scientific vetting. You've got, the science, the engineering, all the different aspects. What could possibly go wrong if we were to do this that you see? I mean, we saw this with LOSOM. We saw this with the EAA reservoir. We saw it with the STA on the state side. I mean, they go through so many steps to hear the public out, to determine the criteria. Now you have a government contractor that receives hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars a year that is, last year, I think they gave close to $2 million in political contributions.
P&J?
Yes.
Wow.
I think 1.7 million is what they had given out in 2024.
And then the sugar industry's political contributions.
In the tens of millions.
Yeah.
So you literally have a scenario where the tail is wagging the dog. The people that are standing to make all the money are policing themselves, greasing the skids, and ramming this through the process before an evaluation has even began to determine what could go wrong here. We have not evaluated what could go wrong. You've got science-based organizations like Everglades Foundation. You've got every organization, every reputable organization that's been involved in the Everglades restoration space up in arms over this, saying, whoa, pump the brakes. This is crazy. We've got to let the science play out. We've got to figure out what are the risks of doing this. All while, they're already, greasing the skids to go to the next step, which is extracting, potentially hundreds of millions to billions of taxpayer dollars to pay for all this. Like, that is the next step for them once they get these permits, is going to get the money to pay for something that we don't even want and could destroy all of Everglades restoration. That is the craziest part about this whole thing.
It really is. And, jumping back to that day, May 22nd, with this Palm Beach County Commission vote, you mentioned there was a couple videos. We mentioned our time got cut. Let's play a couple of those, because I think to give people the picture of what was going on there.
This is an exchange between an attorney who was there having a dialogue with the chair or the mayor of the commission.
Mayor, I'm Richard Grosso. I'm an attorney representing Friends of the Everglades. I must raise a point of order.
I'm sorry. Did you put a card in, sir?
I did, ma'am. I did.
And
the reason
You can have your 2 minutes when the time comes.
the point I'm raising is I believe people have come here. It's a quasi-judicial hearing in reliance on your quasi-judicial rules. 3 minutes, 5 for those who represent organizations.
No, I'm sorry, but minutes are up to the chair.
I understand.
And we gave everybody 2 minutes. If the board wants to ask questions of everyone that comes up, that they are also allowed to do that. We don't encourage that, but it is allowed. So you will have 2 minutes when your card is pulled, when your card is called.
Understood. I want to make it for the record. I think it's a violation of procedural due process
It's
and
not,
quasi-judicial
but thank you.
rules. Thank you.
So if you were just listening to this, it's worth going to our social media and scrolling back, and because you can hear the snarkiness and the tone, but to watch the video and see the facial expressions that are going along with this. I mean, you have an attorney who has dedicated their life to the public interest, the public good. Those attorneys make pennies on the dollar compared to what they could make working for these, developers, sugar industry, whatever, expressing with grave concerns just over the process that's happening. I mean, you had people that read the code, 3 to 5 minutes to speak. Some experts even being allowed 10 minutes according to their rules, and that was all cut off. And
well, it wasn't cut off for everybody. If people that were there, people were allowed extra time to speak, and it was people representing sugar. I know there's another clip out there, but the mayor of Belglade or Pahokee, he finished, his timer went off, and then one of the commissioners literally stopped everyone and said, what were you going to say? Finish your thought there. But everybody else on the Everglades Restoration side was, you're done, get off.
The mayor was even, I mean, you heard her say it right there. We're not encouraging the commissioners to ask questions. I mean, what is going on with that? I mean,
we are going to limit the ability for the public to present their case. And we're going to discourage any dialogue between the public and the commissioners.
And he's broke their own rule.
It's absolutely incredible. And then you could see the obvious bias there, where it was, to Daniel's point, the attitude and the snarkiness and the arrogance in which it was like, you people all here are filling these chambers and you're inconveniencing us, and our meeting is going to run late. It basically felt like you all are going to make us late to our cocktail hour.
Yep. I mean, what was even crazier to add to that, when people were speaking, 2-3 board member or commissioners at a time would just get up and leave mid-sentence, mid-testimony. They would get up out of their chair. I get maybe they had a bathroom break or something, but maybe do that at a different time. Mid-testimony, you'd have multiple board members. It would just be empty seats.
Hearing from the people, I mean, we met so many people because we posted about this on social media, hey, show up, be there. We met dozens of our supporters who we had never engaged with before, never communicated with. It's the first time meeting them. They had never been to any kind of governmental hearing in their lives before. They were so mad, so frustrated, but also wanting to channel that towards making a difference. And that, as frustrating as it was being there today, when that evening, the next day, when these clips, thanks to you, Noah, and Heather and Will and others on our team that were able to get that content out to the masses, all of a sudden, this movement, this rumbling, I mean, we were getting hundreds of phone calls and emails, people reaching out to us directly saying, what can we do? I mean, these are people that friends, fishing guides, some of our core supporters, they just assumed, because we had put out so much information, so many blogs, videos on this rock mine and the concerns, it was like, well, this is a no-brainer. Like, what kind of idiot would ever think of advancing? I mean, this is, of course they're going to kill this. I mean, this is just a stupid idea. Yep. That was what the public thought. But when they saw the arrogance, when they saw the just disrespect, when they saw the seemingly intentional deceit that was happening, all of a sudden the tide shifted on this issue. This went from being something that the public was saying, yeah, this is, whatever, it's advancing, but obviously nobody would really be, that dumb to just let this thing slide. And seeing, thanks to the work of our team, the work of our partner organizations, that were able to capture what happened that day and distribute that to the masses, all of a sudden, the surge of energy behind this fight increased exponentially overnight. And we're still seeing that today with this, how we started our very first podcast this morning, with this clip that I'll play again, the concern being that taxpayer dollars were going to be at risk. And even after Chris got up there and set the record straight, wouldn't you think that a human making a decision that was presented with that new information may pause and say, wait a minute, this isn't really adding up here?
Right. The applicant was in the room. Wouldn't you ask the applicant to come up back to the dais and clarify, will you be seeking public funding for any portion of this project? The applicant knew damn well that was going to be the case. It was just, let them.
We'll move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
let's move on from
I want to play that clip again. Cause again, I mean, a typical business deal, a contractual agreement to do something this significant, one of the first questions that I think any business person worth a salt would say is, how much is this going to cost? What are the implications? Who's paying for it? We have no idea how much this thing's going to cost. I mean, you had the C51 reservoir. At first, there was no mention of it being publicly funded. And then, the lobbyists go up to Tallahassee and start asking for money. One year, as Chris pointed out in his comments, over $260 million has gone of taxpayer dollars to that project, of which Florida Crystals is a partner in that as well, Palm Beach Aggregates. But, with all that discussion, wouldn't you want to know at the early phase of this, how much is this going to cost?
One of the years, the legislature gave them more money than what they requested.
They requested $50 million, and the legislature gave them $100 million.
Oh, just a typo.
Of our taxpayer dollars. They doubled what they were asking for. But I want to play this clip again, because this really gets to the heart of this, being that the sugar industry in Florida wants Florida taxpayers, and that does not just include residents. If you vacation to Florida and buy something, your sales tax is what helps drive our revenue. And that's really what makes this enterprise of Florida work. I mean, our $120 billion a year tourism industry is sustaining. That's the reason why we don't have state income tax in Florida. Mm-hmm. So let's listen to this. A young woman that stood up, our first time meeting her that day, raising this concern. And again, this is a discussion between her and the county commission board. The county commission board then begins asking questions of staff to clarify the point here.
Sounds like this is a publicly funded project.
They're all shaking their head no.
I've seen both.
Aggressively
Their
shaking their head
website
no.
says
Hold on.
publicly funded.
I'll pause your time. Hold on. To clarify, are we putting $1 of public funds towards this?
I'm not aware of anything that's been appropriated for it.
And we have, as a board, not even seen, approved, or heard of any dollars we are putting towards this. This is all privately funded.
Okay, it looked like on their website it had that information, but maybe I read it wrong.
Young lady up here said that she had concerns this would take up public tax dollars, and the staff said, no, this was $0. I have it right here on Southland's website. It says, is this publicly funded project? The answer is yes. The project would be publicly funded. However, the construction startup would be funded privately. So this will cost the taxpayers dollars, just like in the case of C51, which was sold as something that would be privately funded that has now cost the taxpayers over $200 million.
It sounds like this is a
So there you have it. I mean, that is just, and if you are just listening to this podcast, again, our YouTube, our Instagram, that's the video that has gotten well over 2 million views. It really kicked off end of last week. And by the way, we haven't paid a dime to promote any of these posts. This is all just organic social media. You had tens of thousands of people that have engaged with it. The comments, if you really are looking for entertainment, scroll through the comments section. I mean, it's literally every single comment on there is just outrage from the public. You have all walks of life on there, fed up with it. I mean, that is the quintessential frustration of Americans with big government bureaucracies this is where the desire for government efficiency and policing these contractors and bureaucracies that are so good at putting their head in the sand and just turning away from the obvious, which is the fact that there's potentially billions of dollars to be made from this project. Just turning your head, putting your head in the sand towards the potential ramifications that this could have, while just shoving it through the process at warp speed.
Yeah. What you said before this, though, is, seeing these different groups all fighting for, the same thing has been pretty cool to see. There is a groundswell forming of not just us. There's so many other organizations, and each step along this process, another one comes and speaks in opposition, which is, it's good. But I guess, I think I've seen definitely in some comments, people are like, where's the governor on this? We know Governor DeSantis, he ran on Everglades restoration, and you would think with this project that would be a massive threat to Everglades restoration that he would chime in. Do you have any information on where the governor is on this, or just maybe what's next in the process or anything like that?
Well, I mean, we've heard from his own staff that when this project was first presented to him, he didn't like it. We have not spoken to him directly, can't speak for him, but we have pretty serious concerns over how much, if anything, he really knows about this project. I mean, you've got a governor who has been a champion on Everglades restoration, came in, I mean, when his second day in office, he came down here to Southwest Florida, announced his, at the time, seemed unbelievable investment that he wanted to make in Everglades restoration, billions of dollars over his first 4-year term, goes immediately over to Stewart, the other impacted community from the discharges, fires the entire governing board because they successfully extended a lease agreement with Florida Crystals on the land that the EAA reservoir was supposed to be built on. So they locked it up in leases for decades. He came in and cleaned house, and you had governing board members that were refusing to go down, and he was pushing them, saying this is not what the public wanted. So, it was, it's kind of surprising to see all this stuff happening right now. I mean, this is far more concerning than the lease extension. I mean, this is something that, all right, we're already building this project, and this could potentially destroy it, and it's being rammed through the process. So, you've got a governor that whenever he has an announcement on Everglades, he has had dozens and dozens of press conferences. I mean, Chris and I have been at almost every single one of them over the last 6 years, announcing funding on Everglades restoration, announcing policies,
project ribbon cuttings,
groundbreakings.
Groundbreakings.
I mean, he gets on that plane, comes down here, and I think really understands the value of engaging the public on Everglades restoration. He has not said a peep about the Southland mine.
And he's understood the value and importance of Everglades restoration to the public.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been a cornerstone of his legacy. And I think that really, the lack of attention here, every restoration project that there's been, it's come with, press conferences and talking about how this is good and this is a good investment. There's crickets here. And that really begs the question is, what's going on with the Southland project? Is this something that the governor's office, the governor himself, is aware of? Is it something that's just a case of a rogue staffer that's, steering this? And how much is he being kept in the loop on it? We don't know the answer to those questions, but we know one thing for sure. The public attention on this is massive. The public outcry and disapproval of this is something like we have never seen before. And it's on the heels of similar things like the golf courses in the parks, or the transfer of land swap with the Guana Preserve to a developer, things that seem to have been happening. And once those got onto the governor's radar because of the massive amount of public disapproval and unrest around it, there was, hey, there's a course correction that needs to happen here. And I think that's really what the public is looking for is that hero to come in and say, look, and there could be a really great opportunity to stop something that could be so detrimental like a rock mine and bring forward a proposal to turn that same area into 8,600 acres of filter marsh. It would be an incredible benefit to Everglades restoration.
And all parties involved here, from the governor to the sugar companies to all the organizations, it is no secret that that land is absolutely crucial for critical, legitimate Everglades restoration. Like Chris said, the STAs, even going back to the late 2000s, I believe it was around 2008 when U.S. Sugar went to the state and sought to sell all their land. Their CEO was out front acknowledging the value that their land provides for Everglades restoration, called it the missing link because it was never previously available. I mean, everybody knows, every scientist knows the importance of that. It is this expired farmland that has oxidized through 6-8 feet of peat soil down to the cap rock, that acquiring that, not taking it, but acquiring it at
Above fair market
a bit
value.
above, paying what paying money to the sugar companies to turn this land into meaningful projects like the stormwater treatment areas. That is something that, above all else, would probably have the greatest single benefit on reducing these crisis scenarios of red tide super blooms that are significantly exacerbated by the discharges and the toxic cyanobacterias and the starving of Florida Bay of the desperately needed clean water that Everglades restoration provides. I mean, you have this scenario where the filters, the kidney or the liver of the Everglades, being these wetlands, are running at capacity. I mean, 90+% on average, some years 98% of the water that goes through there is just sugarcane runoff. Yet the taxpayers are paying 75% of the construction operations of these wetlands. We have a crisis where we do not have enough of these wetlands to make Everglades restoration work. That has been, the holy grail of Everglades restoration and the rallying cry of so many different Everglades restoration groups from the very beginning. I mean, this whole, call for buying the land in 2013,
Send
2016.
clean water south.
Sending clean water south. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I actually have a question, because after the Palm Beach County Commission vote, that we had our first public comment meeting with the South Florida Water Management District. Again, kind of backwards in this process. We're making public comment after approval's already been made. Anyways, while we were there, there was, from, I don't want to say the opposition, but the other side that were in support of the Southland project, was a lot of people that live in those communities, and they kept saying over and over, this is going to provide a lot of jobs. We need those jobs. Our community needs those jobs. If it was in this dream world that we're creating, if it was an STA project, would there still be jobs available to this community? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's estimated that Everglades restoration produced over 75,000 jobs. So,
well, that's just the EAA reservoir alone.
Just the EAA reservoir. Yeah. So the thing about it is, what is the quality of those jobs?
The ones
that they're
saying
claiming
right now?
Are they actual new jobs? What is the quality? What are the risks that come with those jobs? I mean, if you drive through those communities, they're some of the most impoverished in the state, and you've got this dynamic where the industrial sugar industry is making billions of dollars, injecting tens, if not hundreds of $1 million into politics, yet the communities that are the hub of that industry are completely impoverished.
Yeah.
There's a very, heavy, unbalance there of where the benefit is going.
Yeah.
And I think something else before we kind of move on back to like where we are today in the process, and something that happened significantly. But one of the comments that really struck, what we're seeing here is this continuing evidence that there's just this lack of truthfulness and transparency that's going on here. And the applicant at that county commission meeting, they were questioned, hey, did you talk about this project with all these conservation organizations that are in the room here?
Mm-hmm.
And the comment was, oh yeah, we brought this before any organization that would work on this space. And what they said, I believe we have the clip. We can play that clip, but I can tell you, Captains for Clean Water has been intimately involved in all of Everglades restoration stuff for the past almost 10 years.
Yeah, Google water quality Florida Everglades restoration.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
nobody reached out to us.
Yep, and that was what I was kind of saying earlier, is you would think the people like ourselves and this more science-based organizations that do this every single day, and they have been for years and years with Everglades restoration, you would think the group that claims they are doing this for Everglades restoration, you would think they would reach out to these groups. And let's play this clip because there might be some other information that says otherwise.
Did you reach out to any of these interested parties
one of the
and
commissioners.
talk to them?
Yes, we did. When we first started this project, we reached out to every entity or organization we could. The Everglades Foundation, the Everglades Trust, Coastal Conservation Association, anybody that would be actively involved in water in South Florida, yes, we did.
And what was the reaction that you got?
The first year or so, we provided them with the concept that we had. We actually had a meeting with Eric Eichenberg, Steve Davis, and Anna Upton on our first call with the Everglades Foundation. And at that time, we didn't have any issues at all with them. There was no pushback on the project. It was just, let's see where it goes and move forward.
At any time, did they indicate support for what you were offering?
They never had any written support. It was just, there was no negativity towards the project. It was all, we like the concept so far and keep moving.
Did you reach?
So I have a letter here that came immediately in response to that from the CEO of the Everglades Foundation, Eric Eichenberg. And it addresses many different, and we'll have this in the show notes where you can see this for yourself, addresses many of their concerns with this project. But I want to read a quote from here. Again, this is the CEO of Everglades Foundation, Eric Eichenberg. This is to the Water Management District. I write to correct the misleading statements made by the applicant's representative, Matt Edson of Phillips and Jordan, at the recent Palm Beach County Board of County Commissioners meeting on May 22nd, 2025. Mr. Edson suggested that the Everglades Foundation endorsed and encouraged the advancement of the Southland rock mine. On the contrary, the Everglades Foundation stressed the importance of prioritizing any available land in the EAA for restoration, not for rock mining. We did not endorse this proposal, and we did not encourage the advancement of a rock mine.
Well, that kind of speaks for itself, but it goes back to he said he reached out to anybody involved in water.
Meanwhile, you have multiple organizations seen on camera in some of these clips all shaking their head no.
Yeah, so that just goes back to this whole theme of this entire thing.
And it also goes back to if you are entering into a partnership, okay, whether it's, in this case, the government entering into a partnership with a private entity, or if you are entering into a partnership in a business transaction or something else, one of the most important factors there would be the trustworthiness between the relationship in that partnership. And so how could you possibly, in good conscience, move forward with this when you have the entity that you are partnering with was just months earlier suing over one of your main projects and the operations of that water? You are at direct opposition to them. And now their main representative is, I mean, that to me looks like you're either completely twisting what that narrative sounded like, or but you're making false statement. It did not. The what he says happened. You've got the CEO of Everglades Foundation saying it did not, and they're saying they reached out to any party that would be invested or interested in Everglades restoration, and you've got all these other organization representatives behind him saying, not us.
Yep. Yeah, and it's like, so, and in other meetings, Matt Edson, the applicant speaking, on behalf of Sugar, kept saying they've done the research, the science, the data has all been done, and like we've said at the beginning of this podcast, in order for an Everglades restoration project to come online, the amount of science, the amount of engineers that have to take a look at this, it takes years and years. So when he's referring that this research has already been done, is it just private scientists, like their own?
We don't
people?
know.
Well,
Like,
no,
what?
they have it in the app. I mean, you had McVicker Consulting, who's a
Oh.
registered lobbyist for the sugar companies. That there was a whole controversy of the state putting him as the representative on the project delivery team for the new lake regulation schedule. I mean, he's a lobbyist for the sugar companies and for the Department of Agriculture. So we raised concern over Commissioner Freed when that was made. But yeah, you literally have a lobbyist for the sugar company that has this engineering firm that they've had a longstanding relationship there. But he was the person that did, or his firm was the entity that did, all or most of the quote unquote science, planning, engineering around this project. So I mean, it's
Wow.
You literally have the entities that stand to make potentially billions of dollars here, both from the aggregate that they're selling out of this mine, as well as extracting from the taxpayer, which, given the amount of money that they're contributing in Tallahassee, I mean, they're, I think, confident that they can go up to Tallahassee, even though this is not in the public interest. They feel confident that they can, use these same tactics to convince the legislature to take. I mean, they've already proven that model's possible with the C-51 project. But I think that's what they're trying to do here, and they're making it very clear that they want to go take the money from the taxpayer to pay for a rock mine disguised as a water resource project that we don't want, that science is clear that we don't want, and they have figured out through political consultants and lobbyists how to grease the skids on this to where it could be shot through with the least possible amount of public engagement. And by the time it, gets into the planning phase of it, the cake's already baked, and they have all the authorizations they possibly need to be able to move forward. And that is a great segue into the absolutely critical point where we're at right now today, being Monday, June 2nd. Last Friday, May 30th, the Department of Environmental Protection issued a notice of intent to approve Southland's ERP permit, which is the very last thing that they need in order to move forward with the excavation and construction of this rock mine. That was just issued. They did not issue the permit. I want to be very clear. They can revoke that. Those permits have been revoked in the past when they're in this phase. They can be challenged. Governor DeSantis has the ability to direct DEP not to issue this permit. That is clearly the smart thing to do right here. But it was absolutely shocking, that the state continued. If you've got, as Chris was saying, entities that were on the opposite side of a federal lawsuit attempting to hijack the water supply in this $4 billion taxpayer-funded EAA reservoir, which would have eliminated the benefits that it provides to reducing the coastal discharges, which is the whole reason that we exist as an organization. Why would you give them, if it's not for corruption, if it's not for gaming the system for the good of 2 or 3 corporations at the expense of every resident of Florida, every visitor of Florida, and the economy overall that depends on tax revenue from our tourism revenue, from our tourism industry? Why would you give them the very last thing that they need? It just makes no sense. That is what absolutely reeks of corruption in this case.
Yeah. So I think, high level, it's not completely over yet.
It's not.
Okay.
I am incredibly hopeful seeing the incredibly diverse movement, uprising, groundswell like we have never seen before in the history. I mean, we've never had a video that got 2 million views. I mean, it's getting like 20,000 views an hour on YouTube.
It's not a video that's been up for a long time. This is it. It was published
2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just skyrocketing. And the number of people that are just coming out of the woodwork. I mean, people I haven't heard from in years that are reaching out, just absolutely frustrated, mad. What in the hell is going on? I mean, we are getting nonstop phone calls. We are getting, personally people that we've engaged with. I mean, this is absolutely going viral on social media. The fishing community as a whole, residents of all over the state. We've had friends and family members, and again, people that we hardly know out of state reaching out to us saying, what is going on in Florida right now? I thought you guys were, making all this progress with Everglades restoration. How in the world is this happening right now? I mean, that is the recipe that it takes to right the ship when something, clearly, no matter how you slice this, something has gone way off the tracks with this. This is Everglades restoration, our progress, momentum, not as an organization, but as a state, as a nation working on the largest ecosystem restoration project our country has ever undertaken. For it to be derailed with the tail wagging the dog of this, contractor and arguably the largest political influence in the state of Florida, just because, they want to make, a bunch of money off this thing. It doesn't make sense to people. But beyond not making sense, people are very, very mad. I have not seen this level of anger and frustration and just genuine disgust. This is why the public interest towards government efficiency and having somebody, looking over these contractors that are, taking hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to build these projects. Some of that stuff is good, but when you see something like this, you're like, whoa, my tax dollars are going to make Big Sugar richer because they figured out a loophole to call a rock mine that they've tried to put in there for many decades, but call it a water resource project that none of the groups that are fighting for Everglades restoration want, and are saying it could be, a death threat to Everglades restoration as a whole. That's the problem here.
Yeah. I mean, I think one more time to wrap this up, I just want to, let the people know that this is not over, but maybe more high level. What is a pathway to get this killed?
Governor DeSantis or DEP has the full ability to stop this permit in its tracks and not issue it. It's an easy thing to do. It's a common sense thing to do, and I think it aligns perfectly. I want to go back to that time in history when we were incredibly frustrated with the corruption at the South Florida Water Management District. Right before Governor DeSantis came down, just a couple days before he came down to Florida, he made an inaugural address, signed an executive order a couple days later down here. But I want to go back to that inaugural address because I think it really sets a vision. It sets a vision of what we should be doing as a state, what our priorities should be, what we should be willing to do, and most importantly, the fortitude and resilience that it takes.
And it was in a time very similar where the public outcry and unrest around these issues was at an all-time high. And now here we are. I think it's extremely relevant.
This is DeSantis's inaugural address?
This is Governor DeSantis's inaugural address in January of 2019.
Okay.
Our economic potential will be jeopardized if we do not solve the problems afflicting our environment and water resources. People come to Florida because of its natural beauty. Tourism is not only a pillar of our state's economy, it helps spread the tax burden to non-Floridians, limiting taxes on our own citizens. But this could be in jeopardy if we do not solve our pressing environmental problems. As the great philosopher Yogi Berra remarked, if people don't want to come, nobody is going to stop them. Now, for Florida, the quality of our water and environmental surroundings are foundational to our prosperity as a state. It doesn't just drive tourism. It affects property values. It anchors many local economies and is central to our quality of life. The water is part and parcel of Florida's DNA. Protecting it is the smart thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do. I will lead efforts to save our waterways. We will fight toxic blue-green algae. We will fight discharges from Lake Okeechobee. We will fight red tide. We will fight for our fishermen. We will fight for our beaches. We will fight to restore our Everglades, and we will never, ever quit. We won't be cowed, and we won't let the foot draggers stand in our way. We resolve to leave Florida to God better than we found it.
And there you heard it from the man himself, Governor DeSantis, at his inaugural address. I think that is important to realize and to kind of wrap this conversation up. This issue of Everglades restoration is not an environmentalist issue. This is an issue that impacts everyone, whether you like going to the beach, whether you like fishing, hunting, but even to the people that just want to come to Florida for a week to vacation. This impacts you. If you're a resident of another state that wants to spend the happiest week of your year with us down here in Florida, this issue impacts you. And in turn, your tax dollars that you're spending here is what makes this economic engine able to survive. If you're somebody who moved to Florida because you didn't want to have to pay state income taxes, this is an issue that you should be concerned with. And that is what Governor DeSantis brought to this fight, was that understanding that this is not an environmentalist issue. This is a Florida's economy issue. I mean, just since Captains for Clean Water has been around the last 9 years, the tourism industry has grown from a $70 billion industry to almost $130 billion a year economic impact. And that cyclical side of all this is what is so important to remember, and the exact reason why we should not be rushing something through when we have not had the time to sit back and think, what are the unintended consequences of building a rock mine in the middle of the historic Everglades that Governor DeSantis led us towards resolving to leave Florida to God better than we found it. Putting a rock mine in the historic Everglades that's desperately needed for Everglades restoration in these farm fields that are nearing fallow, that's not leaving Florida to God better than we found it. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah, we don't need a rock mine. We need more filter marshes. We need more true restoration. I think we're probably to a point where we could wrap this up. I mean, we're going to probably have more information on this to come.
Yep. And this was our first podcast. So, I was literally playing those clips from my iPad here. We're figuring out our machine. We've got one of the microphones halfway through kind of fell off the table. So we're figuring things out as we go. But again, we felt that it was critically important to get this information out. We cannot thank you enough for your time for listening to this.
Also, it's thank many of the people out there that have podcasts that have had us on their podcasts. All of those people, they're numerous, too many to name, but they have all inspired us and showed us the value of long form content. And if it wasn't for them providing their platforms to share Captains for Clean Water's message, I don't think we would probably be advancing it with this at this time. And so I would just say thank you to everybody who's had us on your podcasts. You've been an encouragement and inspiration to us, and a really a significant platform for us to have these longer format conversations.
And this is a commitment that we're making going forward. We really do believe in the power of deep understanding of issues. And by launching this podcast, we're not just doing this as a one-time thing. We are making a commitment going forward that we're going to continue to tell the full story of what's happening here in Florida with these Everglades restoration projects, with these schemes to undermine them. But as we know, Florida is dying from the death of 1,000 cuts. There's a lot of different issues that are impacting it. Everglades restoration, the discharges, the red tide, the toxic algae, they're the heart attack that needs to be addressed first. But this podcast will certainly allow us to have deeper conversations than we're able to and connect with our supporters. That's what's encouraging to us about it. We'll be able to talk about more on here. We'll be able to bring on some incredible guests. We've got a lot of ideas, and we're really excited to bring this podcast to life. However, it's critically important to us that you, the listener, are the ones that really drive the direction, the vision, the impact, and what you want to hear on this podcast. So I think, during real time when we've been on here, been sending texts to our teams. We just started a new email address, podcast@captainsforcleanwater.org. That will also be in the show notes. But we would really appreciate you taking the time to just give us some feedback. What can we do better? How can we more effectively educate you on this fight that we've been in now for 9 years? It is our whole world. Everybody on our team wakes up, we live it, we breathe it, we go to bed with it. Every single day, our life is surrounded by this fight against one of the most influential special interests in the state of Florida. That was the reason why we were 16 years into what was supposed to be a 30-year plan to save the Everglades, and 0 of the 68 projects have been completed. But hearing that outside perspective is what helps us so much better educate our supporters, articulate the most important points. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. And Chris, Noah, myself, we will be reading all of the emails that come in personally on that. It's not something that others on the team are going to kind of sort through. All of our eyes will be on those directly. We may not have a chance to respond to every single one of them, but we will certainly, we will hear what you say, and we want to make this one of the very best podcasts. This will be on the front lines of Florida's conservation in the state of Florida, water quality in the state of Florida. We're committing not to just have another podcast, but to make something that truly is incredible. And we're committing our time to this. This is going to be a regular thing. We look forward to having you back in the future. And we will certainly keep you updated on what's going on with this rock mine.
Yep. And I would end that the power that this movement has is the power of people's voices. Authentic voices carry much more weight, much more value than paid lobbyists. And so those voices that you all have are the voices we depend on to put pressure, to move the needle on issues like this rock mine. It's also your voices that we're looking for to guide where this podcast goes, who you hear from, who you want to hear from, what direction it takes. We value all of the people in Florida providing their input and using their voice on it's. We got started in this fight because how this issue is affecting us as fishing guides and as Floridians. But it's important to us to hear from people how these issues affect them. Mm-hmm. And, we, again, they're the most important part of the equation in this movement to save the Everglades for us is the voice of the people. And that's what I hope that we can incorporate into this platform.
Yep. All right. Podcast number 1 complete. We'll catch you guys next time.